Before you let your past define you, before doubt steals your faith, before fear makes you forget who's writing your story, pause. This video is not just a message, it's a turning point. If life has knocked you down, if regret is louder than hope. If you've ever wondered, can I still rise? Then what you're about to hear is for you. This is for the ones who've been through pain, but refuse to let it be the end. This is for those ready to trade shame for strength, confusion for clarity, and fear for faith. Stay with me till the end, because every second of this message is crafted to remind you of something powerful. You are not finished. You are being rewritten by a greater hand. And your greatest chapter has yet to be lived. Let's begin. The past is not a prison. It is a teacher. Many people walk through life shackled by the weight of their history. They wear regret like a chain, convinced that their mistakes are permanent stains on who they are. But what if the past was never meant to punish you? What if it was meant to prepare you? The events behind you, no matter how painful, are not there to keep you trapped. They are there to wake you up, to teach you what you needed to know, even if the lesson came wrapped in heartbreak, loss, or failure. Every person has moments they wish they could erase, words they should not have said, opportunities they missed, versions of themselves they no longer recognize. But growth does not come from pretending the past didn't happen. It comes from meeting it with courage. It comes from asking, what did this teach me? Instead of, why did this happen to me? The past is not your identity. It is your curriculum. And like every good teacher, it repeats lessons until you learn them. Some of your deepest wounds carry your most important wisdom. The rejection that crushed your confidence taught you the value of self-worth. The failure that embarrassed you taught you the importance of persistence. The silence of seasons where God felt distant taught you how to listen for His voice in stillness. None of it was wasted. None of it needs to be denied or buried. It simply needs to be understood and then used. When you look back at your past, not as a sentence but as a source of strength, you begin to transform. You see that your scars are not signs of weakness. They are signs that you healed. They are proof that you kept going, even when it hurt. And that resilience is something no one can take away from you. Every time you chose to stand back up, even when the world gave you every reason to quit, you were learning. Learning how strong you are. Learning how deeply you want to live a better story. But to access the wisdom of the past, you must stop running from it. You must sit with it, study it, ask what it's trying to show you. Because those moments, however dark, contain something that can shape your future. Not to repeat the pain, but to rise above it. Not to live in fear, but to live in clarity. You cannot change what happened, but you can change what it means to you. That's where power lives. In the choice to turn lessons into leverage. The past is not your enemy. It is your elder. It came before you, but it doesn't have to hold you back. It can walk with you, guiding you, shaping you, warning you, and whispering to you. When you learn to see your past as a teacher instead of a trap, you no longer fear it. You use it. You grow from it. And most of all, you begin to honor the path that led you here. Not because it was perfect, but because it prepared you for everything that comes next. Reflection transforms experience into insight. Without reflection, life rushes past us as a series of moments, some painful, some joyful, but many without meaning. We live, we stumble, we fall, we rise, But unless we pause to truly examine what each experience brought into our lives, we risk repeating the same cycles without growth. Reflection is the bridge between experience and understanding. It is how wisdom is born. Anyone can go through hard times, but not everyone grows from them. The difference lies in the willingness to reflect, to ask deeper questions, to sit with discomfort until clarity surfaces. It's easy to be busy, to keep moving forward, burying the past under distractions or routines. But movement is not the same as progress. True progress comes from understanding. When you reflect, you take your experiences out of the shadows and bring them into the light. You ask, what did that moment teach me? Why did I react the way I did? What patterns keep repeating in my life, and what are they trying to show me? In doing so, you reclaim power over your story. You are no longer just living through life, you are learning through it. Reflection isn't about guilt or shame. It's about perspective. It allows you to see not just what happened, but why it mattered. Why it still echoes in your thoughts. Why it still shapes your fears, your choices, your relationships. Once you understand the why, the healing begins. Once you understand the lesson, the past loses its power to control you. You stop being a victim of your story and begin becoming the author of it. That is the miracle of reflection. It allows you to rewrite the narrative without changing the facts. When you learn to reflect deeply, even moments of confusion become seeds of clarity. Even the things you once resented begin to reveal their purpose. Pain becomes a teacher, not a punishment. Disappointment becomes direction. And most of all, you begin to trust the process of your own becoming. You understand that you're not just surviving, you're evolving. That every trial has carved something essential into your character. That every chapter, even the darkest ones, has something sacred buried in it, if you're willing to look. Reflection requires honesty. It demands stillness, and it invites humility, the kind that says, I don't know everything yet, but I'm willing to learn. It turns regret into resolve. It turns confusion into clarity. And over time, it builds a foundation so strong that future storms cannot shake it. Because when you understand where you've been, you're less likely to get lost going forward. Reflection doesn't stop the pain, but it gives it meaning. And in meaning, we find direction. We find strength. We find peace. That is the gift of reflection, not to dwell in the past, but to extract from it the wisdom we need to create a better future. Faith bridges the gap between what was and what can be. In life, there are spaces we all walk through, moments where logic runs dry, answers fall short, and the future feels like a fog with no shape. The past, heavy with its scars and silence, often clings to our shoulders, whispering reminders of what went wrong. And yet, we stand here, longing for something more, for healing, for purpose, for peace. That longing, that hunger, is not weakness. It is the echo of something eternal within you, calling you forward. Faith is the bridge between the pain you've known and the promise that still waits. It is not always visible. It rarely feels comfortable. Faith does not remove doubt. It walks alongside it. It is the quiet decision to trust when fear is louder. It's what remains when the evidence runs out and the questions multiply. It is not the absence of uncertainty, but the refusal to be ruled by it. Because deep within every soul is a knowing that we were not meant to be abandoned in our brokenness, and that life, no matter how chaotic, is not without design. Faith says, there is more. Faith says, I am held even when I cannot feel it. So many people try to build their future only on what they can control, on logic, on certainty. But there comes a point when control ends, when logic cannot comfort, when the heart needs something greater than facts. That's where faith begins, not as a blind leap, but as an inner leaning toward hope, toward trust. Not trust in outcomes, but trust in meaning. Trust that your life is not random. Trust that your journey is not unnoticed. Trust that even in the darkness, there is light ahead. Faith is a discipline. It must be chosen, again and again, especially in the waiting, especially in the aftermath of loss. It's easy to believe when everything makes sense. But the kind of faith that transforms you is the kind that survives disappointment and still holds on, that refuses to shrink in the face of what it does not yet understand, that says, I may not see the full picture, but I know the painter. I may not feel strong, but I know I'm not walking alone. It is this kind of faith that turns sorrow into strength and fear into fuel. When you lean into faith, you're not ignoring your past. You're honoring it by refusing to let it define the limits of your future. You're choosing to believe that redemption is real, that healing is possible, and that your life still holds chapters worth living. The past may explain how you got here, but faith gives you the power to decide where you go next. It lifts your eyes from what you've lost to what you can become. And in that upward gaze, in that sacred trust, something powerful begins to shift, not just around you, but within you. That is where real transformation begins. That is how you walk forward, through the unknown, beyond the past, on the bridge that only faith can build. Pain in the past becomes power in the present when given to God. Every human life holds a private archive of suffering, silent grief, broken trust, lost dreams, or battles fought in darkness with no witness but your own soul. It is tempting to bury these experiences, to numb them, to pretend they never happened. But pain that is suppressed does not disappear. It spreads. It leaks into your choices, your relationships, your identity. Yet there is another path, not one of avoidance, but one of surrender. When pain is handed over to God, not as a demand for explanation, but as an offering of trust, it begins to transform. God does not waste wounds. What broke you in the past becomes the very place where strength is born, not by your effort alone, but through divine healing that restores what suffering tried to take. Pain in human hands often becomes bitterness, but pain in God's hands becomes purpose. He does not erase the past, but he rewrites its power. The very events that threaten to define you with despair begin to shape you with resilience, wisdom, and compassion. When you give your hurt to God, you are not denying what happened. You are declaring that it will not have the final word. There is a sacred transaction that takes place when you stop clinging to pain as identity and instead release it as testimony. Your story becomes not one of defeat, but of deliverance. God takes what the world calls failure and uses it as fuel for faith. He turns humiliation into humility, tragedy into transformation. And that is not just religious language. It is a lived reality for those who have reached the end of themselves and found God waiting there with grace, not judgment. Many believe healing means forgetting, but healing through God means remembering differently. The memory still exists, but its grip loosens. It no longer controls your worth, your choices, or your direction. Instead, it becomes a source of empathy. You begin to see others in their pain, not with pity, but with understanding. You carry strength not because you were never wounded, but because you chose not to stay wounded. That choice, again and again, to give your pain to God instead of carrying it alone, is what sets your path apart. This surrender is not a moment. It is a process, sometimes daily, sometimes hourly. But with each surrender, your pain loses power to harm you and gains power to shape you. What was once a source of shame becomes a vessel for grace. The wounds you once hid become the places where light breaks through. You begin to speak from scars, not open wounds. And in that difference lies the quiet authority of someone who has truly overcome. That authority does not shout. It does not seek validation. It simply stands. It moves forward. It holds peace in places where chaos once ruled. That is the gift of giving pain to God, not just relief from suffering, but the rebirth of purpose. Through Him, your past does not just live in memory. It lives in service to who you are becoming. Faith is not passive belief, but active resilience. Too often, faith is misunderstood as a quiet internal agreement, a mental nod toward the existence of something greater. But real faith is not still. It is not silent, and it is not soft. Real faith moves. It gets up when everything inside you wants to stay down. It speaks life when the world only echoes defeat. It walks through darkness, not because it sees the light, but because it believes the light is still there. Faith is not the absence of fear or struggle. It is the fierce decision to continue despite them. When storms rise and certainty collapses, it is not belief alone that sustains you. It is resilience born from belief. It is the act of choosing again and again to lean into trust instead of giving in to despair. Faith says yes when logic says no. It pushes forward when the path is not visible. It doesn't just sit and wait for divine intervention. It steps out. It takes risks. It builds. It perseveres. That's because faith understands something that mere belief does not. That life will test you. And in that testing, your strength must be proven in action. There are moments when your circumstances will contradict your prayers, when answers won't come, and the silence will feel unbearable. It's in those moments that faith either deepens or disappears. Passive belief crumbles under pressure, but active resilience grows roots in adversity. It says, even if I don't see change today, I will keep going. Even if I feel weak, I will still rise. Even if the doors remain closed, I will keep knocking. Not because I'm sure of the outcome, but because I'm certain of the one I trust. Faith is not soft surrender to fate, but bold cooperation with a greater purpose. It's a decision to build with what you have, to love even when it hurts, to show up even when it's inconvenient. Active resilience means you keep planting seeds even if the harvest seems far off. It's refusing to let today's confusion rob you of tomorrow's promise. It's standing in the ruins of what you thought life would be and saying, I still believe there's more. You won't always feel strong, but you don't have to feel strong to be strong. Faith is not about emotion. It's about commitment. It's a muscle that is built every time you choose to trust instead of retreat. Every time you act with integrity when no one sees. Every time you move forward when nothing makes sense. And as you do, something powerful shifts. You become less reactive to life and more anchored in purpose. The storms still come, but they don't define you. The delays still hurt, but they don't destroy you. Because your foundation is not in what changes, but in what cannot be shaken. That is the kind of faith that doesn't just believe. It becomes. It becomes courage. It becomes perseverance. It becomes the quiet force that carries you through everything life tries to break you with and turns even the hardest seasons into sacred ground for growth. Your past may be your story, but God is the author of your future. Every person carries a history, a trail of decisions, moments, regrets, and memories that form the narrative of who they believe they are. That story can be heavy. It can feel permanent, like it defines your worth, your potential, your limits. But the truth is, while you may have lived those pages, you do not have to stay bound to them. Because the pen that writes the future is not in the hands of your past. It's in the hands of a greater author, one who sees the full arc of your life, even when you cannot. People often mistake history for destiny. They look at the mistakes they've made, the trauma they've endured, the dreams that failed, and they assume the rest of the story must follow that same painful script. But God doesn't write from human limits. He writes from eternal vision. He doesn't edit your past. He redeems it. He doesn't ignore your scars. He transforms them into signs of grace. Your past may explain where you've been, but it does not determine where you're going. That is the difference when you trust in a divine author who sees beyond what you've seen. So many walk around trying to rewrite their own past, as if healing means erasing. But true transformation comes when you hand the story over and say, "Here, God, you write the next chapter." That moment is not one of weakness, but of unimaginable strength. Because it takes courage to release control, to trust that the one who made you knows how to restore you. When God takes over the narrative, the plot doesn't just improve, it becomes purposeful. Even pain has a place. Even silence has a role. Even waiting has weight and meaning. Letting God author your future does not mean you won't face trials. But it does mean you won't face them alone. It means that every twist and turn is known, that every heartbreak has healing written into it, and that the future unfolding before you is not random or reckless, it is crafted with care. When you believe that, you stop living reactively. You begin living intentionally. You realize your value is not determined by where you've failed, but by who holds your future. And that realization changes everything. It changes how you walk through difficulty. It changes how you forgive yourself. It changes how you speak, act, dream, and lead. Because you're no longer trying to earn peace. You're anchored in the one who gives it freely. You stop seeing yourself as broken and start seeing yourself as becoming. You stop hiding the chapters you're ashamed of and start seeing them as proof of redemption in progress. That is the power of trusting God with your story. Not that it becomes perfect, but that it becomes sacred. Not that it becomes easy, but that it becomes worth living. When you believe God is the author, you begin to live like your best days aren't behind you. They're ahead. You begin to trust that the same grace that carried you this far is still writing, and the story isn't over yet. In the journey of life, we all carry with us a story, one shaped by mistakes, growth, pain, and faith. But the story isn't finished. When we learn from the past, reflect deeply, choose faith, surrender our wounds to God, live with resilient action, and trust that He is the author of our future, we begin to rebuild not just our lives but our identity. We are no longer bound by what happened. We are propelled by what's possible. Our past no longer defines us. It refines us. Our faith is no longer passive. It becomes power in motion. Every broken piece can become part of a bigger masterpiece when placed in the hands of the one who sees the end from the beginning. This is not just motivation, it is transformation. And it starts with one choice: to believe that your future is still unfolding in grace, strength, and divine purpose. Thank you for giving your time, your heart, and your attention to this message. If these words moved something within you, let that be the spark to take one step forward. Keep growing, keep trusting, keep becoming. Your story matters, and the best is yet to come.